name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you are listening to Chaotic Riffs Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriffs.com, and our special guest today is lead singer and guitarist Rick Lambert from the band Empty Trail, and the band is based out of Texas. Is that correct, Rick?
Yeah, it is.
And is that where you're originally from?
No, I'm actually personally originally from Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I lived in Los Angeles for a little bit and moved up to Austin, I think maybe now 5 years ago.
Okay, and I know when I was growing up there was like I mean, when I was growing up, getting into music and stuff, there was a huge scene in Texas, bands like Dangerous Toys and that. Is there much of a music scene there these days as far as like a rock scene?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think like the live scene has probably changed a lot from what it used to be. So there is a scene, but it probably isn't as prominent as maybe it was, for sure.
And maybe with a band like Empty Trail, you guys are kind of helping to bring that rock element back to, Texas. And now I was reading in the press release your publicist sent me that you in particular, and I guess the band were like heavily influenced by bands like Metallica and Megadeath. So, how did you first get into those bands? You remember like what was a song or the album that you really latched on to?
Oh gosh, I think for me, probably when I heard Master of Puppets when I was young.
Wow. That
song probably just inspired me to pick up the guitar to begin with. I was a guitar player first, and then that kind of led to Megadeth, and I was obsessed with Megadeth for many years. That was like my band. So,
and the funny thing about Megadeth is they're one of the all-time great. I mean, they're in those big four thrash bands, and Dave Mustaine has gone on record saying over the years that ever since being fired from Metallica, he was always he felt that he was like kind of second fiddle to Metallica. He was always trying to make sure that Megadeth beat them, was more popular and all that stuff. Like the two bands were competing. And my way of thinking of, if Dave Mustaine had never been fired, from Metallica, the rest of the world never would have found out what a great singer the guy is, as well as being a great guitar player.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I love Dave Mustaine's writing. I definitely really connected to his music. So, as far as his guitar playing too, great riffs, great songs.
And if you go back to anything Megadeth has done in their career, Dave Mustaine has been the one constant in the band's history. And I think a lot of because he had that anger for being fired from Metallica, he had that angst, and that's why those songs really hold up. Still to this day.
Yeah, I agree.
And to get back to Metallica, because I heard you were heavily influenced by them, and you say a lot of the guitar riffing. I was curious, who do you feel that you style you're playing more after? Would you say James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, Kirk Hammett?
What was your question?
Well, like you're saying in regards to Metallica, you were really influenced by the guitar riffing in that. So I was kind of asking. Of the guitar players that have been in Metallica, who you'd say your playing is most like? Would you say you play?
I would say my playing actually, which I love the most, is probably Marty Friedman actually from Megadeth.
Oh wow!
At least improvising soloing. I mean, he's kind of the style that influenced me the most.
Yeah.
I mean, not I guess riffs, but anything above the 12th fret, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because Marty Friedman is one of those players that I kind of agree with all the guys that have gone through Megadeth. He's even though he's not the original player, that's kind of the one guy that everybody points to. And what's interesting about Marty Friedman is he was like at the pinnacle of his career, or like many people thought when he made the decision to leave Megadeth. But for years, he's had quite an interesting story. He's been living in Japan like for over 20 years. He's immersed himself, in learning the Japanese language. He's fluent, and he's quite the huge pop star in Japan. Putting out these instrumental guitar music, albums.
Yeah, I just saw him. He came to San Antonio a little while ago. It was a great show. It's a great show.
Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting. You were saying like a lot of guitar players. You start out on the guitar and you kind of became a singer later. Was that, when you first got into music, obviously you were a guitar player, but did you always have a desire to be a frontman and a lead singer, or did that kind of come out of necessity, kind of much like when Dave Mustaine put Megadeth together? I'd heard stories that he was originally wanted to have another lead singer, but then he just decided he was going to do it himself because he couldn't find a singer that he felt could do the songs that he was writing justice, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I always had the desire to want to front a band. I always kind of wanted to, create my ideal band, I suppose. Yeah. I didn't really want to rely on, another singer to kind of make that happen. So, but singing did come a bit later.
And do you think if you had hired another singer, you might have been more critical of the way they were performing your material, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. For sure. I mean, I've written most of the music, so from kind of the conception of starting this band, I always had an idea of what the voice would sound like, and especially what's really important to me is, I guess, the lyrical content, connecting to people, really getting my own feelings and emotions out. Yeah. And it wouldn't really feel right to have someone else sing that.
And a lot of guys I've interviewed over the years, Rick, they've told me, like, when you're a lead singer and you play guitar, that's a very difficult skill to master. Did that take you a while to kind of get to the point where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of just, I guess skill-based, so practice the guitar part, practice the singing part, and then practice doing them together, which can be very confusing. But I think like anything else, after a while, you get it.
Yeah, and throughout the years of music history, if you go back, a lot of the great bands when rock music was first coming of age were like trios. Like a couple come to mind, Grand Funk, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Even people would say like the Who is a trio because it's got four guys, but if three guys really just play the instrumentation. So when you're putting together Empty Trail, I was kind of curious. Did you always set out to be like a three-piece band? And kind of what was the reason that you didn't want to have a second guitar player in the band? I was kind of curious about that.
I don't know. I think it felt like a little more unique or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought it was, I don't know, I guess expected to have another guitar player.
I mean, kind of like I was saying, if you look at those bands I was saying, like the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Grand Funk, they may have been a little older than you were, Rick, but the point being that, take a band like Grand Funk, great three-piece band, and, a lot of their songs are real simple, but that's one band that people really took notice of, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed the three-piece thing. I mean, we always get that, actually. Every time we play, it's kind of like, oh, you guys don't have another guitar player, but I kind of dig that. I like the power trio thing, and less people, you can kind of connect more to your band.
And being a three-piece band and you're a sole guitar player, do you ever worry about overplaying? Or I guess my question is, how do you know when to solo and not to, being the frontman and all that as well?
I actually do think about that. I don't know. I don't ever really like to overplay in any regard. I mean, there's a couple solos and some songs, and sometimes it'll happen, and
there's definitely a place for it. And what I mean is, when I was growing up, I grew up on a lot of the bands from the 70s and 80s, and especially the bands from the 80s. A lot of them had those great guitar heroes, like Warren DeMartini, George Lynch, Jakey Lee, and guys like that, just to name a few. And there was definitely a thing about the lead guitar player back in those days, and a lot of newer bands are like, we don't solo, we just we just do our thing. And I'm like, why not? Have a little finesse to what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a time and place for it. I mean, I'm definitely not against not soloing. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I like to solo. I just think maybe, if you do it too much, it kind of takes the excitement over it, and there's a lot of people that can shred and do crazy stuff nowadays.
Yeah.
So. But every once in a while to just bring it out and play it, I think is good,
And even as a fan of music, there's a fine art to like shredding and stuff. I mean, you take a guy like Steve Vai or Joe Satriani. Those guys, they put out great instrumental music, but it's very hard to just put an album of nothing but instrumental music and be able to keep people's attention. You got to have something unique. All the songs got to sound unique and stand kind of alone to really make people take notice. And I mean, that's kind of like if you go to see a Steve Vai or Joe Satriani concert live, see these guys perform live, even though they're just performing instrumental music. I mean, these type of players are able to captivate their audience, if you know what I mean, for over 2 hours, and that just speaks volumes of what they can do on the guitar.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, who your audience is. I mean, if you're playing to a lot of kind of guitar players, they might totally enjoy it, and especially with rock. I mean, everyone likes guitar, but if you're not, you don't play guitar yourself, maybe you aren't really that way. I mean, everyone connects the most with the voice, because everyone has a voice. You can relate to that.
And see, that's the great thing about talking to a guy like you, Rick. You're a lead singer and a guitar player, so you kind of have, two voices. And I gotta be honest with you, Rick. I never heard of your band, Empty Trail, until your publicist sent me a press release about you guys, and then I went and checked out your Facebook page. I went and checked out the videos on YouTube and that, and I kind of dug what I heard. You guys are one of my, I'll be honest, one of my favorite new bands that I'm just kind of, latching onto. And
appreciate that.
And what really grabbed my attention, besides the great guitar playing, is the vocals, the songwriting. I think in order to really get people to take notice of a band, you got to have the songs. And the two singles I heard, My World and I think Lost, what really stood out is, when you're hearing a band for the first time, you're trying to think, who do these guys sound like? Who does this remind me? Have I heard this before? And I could hear some of your influence, but I'll be honest, you guys have a real fresh original thing going. And your vocal style kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe Lane Staley, Alice in Chains.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. I appreciate that. I think every artist band wants to be kind of considered unique. So
yeah, and so when you were first starting out on the guitar, I was curious. Did you take lessons? Would you consider yourself more of a self-taught player?
I did take lessons, and that definitely had an impact on my playing. But I mean, I feel like I was just driven at the beginning of it. I just picked up guitar. I'm like, I want to learn how to play guitar well. And I practiced probably 6 hours a day for a long time.
And do you remember what was the first song you learned to play on the guitar, or did you always want to do your own, original music?
First song, I think I remember having like an acoustic or like classical acoustic guitar and opening up like a Christmas book and learning like Christmas carols on the guitar. So I guess first song ever, probably that. Any first like rock song? Oh gosh, it's hard to say. I don't know.
Did you ever practice on? Because one of the tunes that people I think play the most, I hear, especially when they're first learning, is either "Smoke on the Water" or "Stairway to Heaven."
Well, I'm a guitar teacher too, actually, and I teach that a couple times. So.
Okay. In fact, when I was looking at the videos on YouTube, I don't remember the name of who it was, but there was a comment on there that said how much a person loved the song, and they were boasting. The guy singing this song, he's my guitar teacher. Wow.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And now, how often do you teach guitar? Like, if someone was interested in taking lessons, I mean, it's kind of word of mouth. People refer.
Yeah, pretty much. We can do like a Skype thing, stuff like that. So.
And when somebody's taking lessons from you, do they kind of typically do they just kind of want to learn chords, or is it kind of case by case, or they tell you, I want to learn how to play these songs, or what typically? I
think it's different, for everybody. I mean, everybody kind of wants something out of that. Yeah. Some people just want to have fun. Some people really want to, world domination. Play the best they can. Some just want to learn a song that they like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different for everybody, just like it was different for me. I mean, for me, I guess it was like, world domination. Like, I'm trying to become the best guitar player I can be, and,
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to do that, so.
And like I said, to me, the key to having any real success with any band is you got to have the songs. And based on the two songs I heard, I mean, they're both so... I'll go with the latest single. I think it's called Lost. Now, when I listen to that, I wouldn't refer to even a ballad, or maybe one of those 80s power ballad. I would refer to it maybe as an epic song, an epic ballad. It's kind of got elements of a ballad, but just everything about it is so huge and epic, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I was reading the press release. It says the song "Lost" is kind of about stuff people suffer through when they suffer loss. Was it written about anybody or any specific lost in your life or somebody in the band's life?
It wasn't really about anything specific.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I try to kind of like keep the lyrics away from specifics, just because I think everyone connects to things differently, and sometimes people haven't gone through specific events the same way. But I think what we can relate to is how it makes us feel, and I think a lot of people have definitely felt their life like, where am I? What's going? What should I do? What is the path? I have no idea. And that's kind of it's Lost, the name of the title track. Was just kind of, I guess, I don't know, having expectations and maybe things not reaching that, and just being confused, not understanding where to go next, and learning to cope with that.
And on that front, like what you wrote the song about, but did you ever trip out, like if you have a fan come up to you and kind of tell you, oh hey, Rick, I love the song, I love that song so much, or this is what it meant to me, it's so close to my heart because it reminds me of something I experienced, and maybe it's not even what the song is about, but you think, wow, you got that out of my song? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's always my goal.
Yeah.
Truly, I mean, I just want to connect with people with what I've gone through, and I know how important certain tracks were for me. I mean, other than just talking about kind of the coolness of like riffs and whatever, but just connecting to a track and really feeling like this song gets me. I mean, that's always been my goal. Always. That's always what's driven me.
Yeah, and the music world being what it is today is really more based on kind of what you're doing, which is releasing a song at a time, or kind of more about singles, and then when you kind of have enough songs together, kind of put out a CD or whatever. So is that less pressure for you, like going, as opposed to going in and having to do a whole full-length album all at once, kind of being able to release the songs kind of one at a time and kind of get the fans' feedback that way?
More pressure?
No, like less pressure in the sense that, as opposed if like back in the day, at least when I was growing up, bands really didn't tour unless they had, let's say, a new album. You go in the studio to make a new album just so you could go out and tour, as opposed to these days, a lot of bands are just releasing like a song at a time, and I would think that would be less.
Tour on a single.
Less pressure, yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think there's a lot more emphasis on the song, if anything. So
that's kind of the point I was trying to make. Whereas, like, in the old days, if a band would go into a studio, a lot of times you'd have the stuff already kind of pre-written. A lot of the songs, because you're writing around the same period of time, or a lot of songs are going to sound the same. Whereas if you do it the modern way, you might, but the songs aren't going to necessarily sound just alike, because maybe you might record them, throughout a span of, a couple of months,
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that front, I know "Lost" is a title track you were saying of. Now, have you guys actually released the new EP, or are you getting ready to release it?
The release dates are actually October 18th.
Oh, wow. And how many tracks will be on the EP?
It's going to be 5, including "Lost," of course, and "My World," which before we weren't sure it was going to be in the EP, but the label decided they wanted it on that. So. Wow.
And so, what are you guys currently touring, or you think you'll tour more once the EP hits?
Yeah, we have something in November that's kind of getting talked about.
Okay.
So once we figure that out, I know it's going to be like a Southwest U.S. tour.
Oh, cool.
So that will be cool in support of the album.
And as far as purchasing the EP once it comes out in October, is it going to be available both physical copies as well as digital?
Yep. Yeah. We got CDs made, so you can buy the CD if you're into the physical side of it, which I miss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school guy, Rick. I will tell you. I remember back in the day. I still buy physical CDs. I mean, for a simple fact. When I'm driving every day in the car, I like to have something to listen to. I mean, when I was a kid, I would, I remember going to the local Tower Records and checking out all the new releases, even if I didn't have enough money to buy them all, or I'd kind of plan out what I was going to buy next, And it was a fun time. A lot of these kids today, they don't even have that experience. I mean, I live here in like Los Angeles, California. And the closest record store to where I live is, you got to go to Hollywood, which is like almost 45 minutes away,
Amoeba?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's I do get a lot of my stuff online, like at Amazon and that, because I believe in still supporting the bands. Like if you're a big enough fan of a band, you should support, buy their music, buy their merchandise and stuff. And I think that's the way to do it. I mean, I enjoy still looking at the artwork, reading the liner notes. I mean, that's what it's about to me. A lot of people, they just want everything like immediately right now, or it's not even about that. It's like, well, I'm not even going to buy the whole album. I just want to buy the latest single,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I think just to have the thought of, waiting in line to try to get like a CD or whatever of your favorite band, and then just living with it for a couple months.
Yeah.
In car. I mean, it doesn't really happen the same way to, I guess, maybe the younger generation for sure. I mean, it is so much emphasis on that single, that song, that streaming.
It's a lost art form. I mean, that's
yeah, it really is.
That's why I gotta respect. I really have a huge amount of respect for bands like you that continue to put out new music, or even still, because a lot of bands that they're just releasing their music digitally. Because let's be honest, who's buying CDs? Not too many people these days. And then there are a lot of these established bands that and they can kind of get away with it. Because they already have a huge catalog of music. Well, we're just gonna live on our catalog of music. We're not gonna bother writing or recording any music because hey, nobody's buying it. So I give kudos to bands like you that continue to put out new product, physically.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I gotta ask, I always love to ask people the band name, Empty Trail. How did you guys come up with that? That's a pretty cool sounding name.
Thank you. I don't know. I came up with it. I think it was two situations. Actually, one of them isn't like super awesome. Uh-huh. It was like I'm trying to basically think of a name that hasn't been used before. I was kind of pairing two words that maybe wouldn't work, and eventually I came with Empty Trail, and it actually does have meaning too. Mm. But I remember like searching on Google. I'm like, oh gosh, no one's got this name. But really, the meaning for me is kind of, I've always been about like self-discovery. Yeah. It's kind of what I explained with the Lost thing. Trying to understand myself, trying to understand the world we live in. Just trying to kind of like find my way in a sense. So I think it's kind of, ties into that journey. Wow. And the reason I asked too is I know that's one of the hardest things for bands to always do is coming up with a name's got to be one of the hardest things. I mean, and for sure nowadays, because it's like every name's taken.
An Empty Trail to me, like I mean, not even having talked to you, but just kind of reading into the name, I thought maybe that had an Indian influence. But see, it's kind of cool because it's just so simple, and like you said, nobody's ever used it before,
Yeah, appreciate that.
And so Rick, what else is going on with the band? Like you got the new EP coming out. I guess you said in October. Will you be releasing any more videos for any of the songs?
Yeah, we just got a music video coming out this Monday, August 26th. Yeah, it's got a music video for Lost.
Okay, cool.
Pretty excited about it. I think it's a pretty cool looking video. It was directed by Teresa Jolie here in Dallas, Texas.
Oh wow.
And it's interesting, yeah.
And let me ask you, how long has the band been together?
Just 3 years.
Oh wow! Look at what you've accomplished in a little bit of time.
Mhm.
And I got to tell people that don't know this, Rick. Like I said, I never really heard about the band, but I love what I'm hearing so far, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the stuff that's going to be on the EP. But you've got, for anybody who doesn't know, you've got the same publicists as like Judas Priest, Michael Schenker, and a lot of other great artists. So I think you're really. I've been working with Chip several years. He's been giving me many great interviews over the years, and you really got a great group of people working behind the scenes with you there.
I think so too. Chip's awesome.
So, unless there's anything else you'd like to say to the people here, Rick, before we wrap this up, I'd like to once again thank you for taking time to talk to me, and maybe once the EP comes out and I have a chance to hear everything, we could do a follow-up interview and we could talk specifically about the other tracks that haven't been released yet. But thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. We'll do that.
Okay, you take care. You take care, my friend, and we'll be talking. Bye-bye.
Take care, Jason.
Have a nice day. Bye. Uh-huh.